So, Nikki, it's 2.5 years nearly since I interviewed you, which was just before you started your 63 marathons in 63 days, which was July 2017?
August, actually. Yeah.
August 2017.
Yeah. That was, gosh, that's quite a time ago. Yeah. Time flies.
So it'd be good to have a catch up and find out what's been happening. But one of the thing we mostly wanted to talk about today was to talk about your experience of the menopause and how you're coping with that now. And you told me that when you were doing the 63 marathons, that's when you first started thinking that you had some perimenopausal symptoms. So how was that?
Yeah, so it was just before I started. I had a few symptoms, and I wasn't sure what they were. The hot flushes through the days, and the brain fog, and then when the 63 started, I was still having regular periods, so I knew that the periods were coming, but there was a lot more intensity to them and a lot more emotional upheaval, I think, during it, and I wasn't sure whether that was because of the extremeness of the adventure, or whether it was the hormones and things changing within me. And I think it was a bit of a combination of both. But yeah, there was. I started realizing that I was going through this perimenopausal phase.
Yeah. So that must have made it really quite tough to keep, to actually complete the challenge.
It was tough, but before I started my marathons, I said to myself and to other people that this was a training run for the next one. So it was a mental strategy to make sure that I didn't feel too much pressure about the fact that this was a big thing that I was doing. It was always going to be a training run for the next one, big long training run. But yeah, so the learning process of putting myself through that, but also experiencing the perimenopausal changes that I've started going through. If you've got that attitude that maybe you're going to go with the flow and find out and learn along the way, then it's makes it coping easier.
Yeah. Okay. So what has happened since then, in terms of, you said it was a preparation for the next challenge. So what was the next challenge?
So the next challenge had, in my head, I'd always had it that I was going to run across Australia. When I finished the 63 marathons, I realised that I wasn't quite capable of moving straight onto Australia. So I was going to have a little break. But it turned out that I saw opportunities and decided to run around Ireland. So that was the next thing that popped up. Ireland was close, it was short, but long enough to test running more than a marathon a day. So that was my next adventure. And then last year I was supposed to run across Australia. Didn't quite pan out that way, but opportunities came up, and I ended up running across the Netherlands and the length of Wales. So all really good training sessions for the run across Australia, which is happening this year.
So quite a lot of miles since I last interviewed you.
Quite a lot of miles, plus a lot of little mini adventures. So mini adventures being sort of like between 2 and 4 days along the way. So lots of mileage. Yeah.
So how has during that time, how have you how have your perimenopausal symptoms developed, and how have you coped with them?
So my periods are getting more erratic. So that's the thing that I've noticed. But then also on top of that is that the what happens during my period has changed as well. So they're more erratic, and then very heavy, and that has never been the case for me. Mine were always fairly short and easy to cope with. So this has been a new learning curve, and trying to run and do extreme running or ultra running has an impact when you're trying to run whilst you've got your period in remote locations, and perhaps not even remote locations. So one of the adventures I went on was I ran across the Netherlands. Now that wasn't a remote location, but I planned it all thinking, right, I'll go, I know where the supermarkets are, I know where the petrol stations are. I mapped out where the restaurants and stuff were that I'd be passing by, and I soon discovered that supermarkets don't have toilets. Petrol stations don't have toilets, and so there was learning to cope with things that happen along the way.
Yeah, that must have been really difficult to.
That was probably one of the toughest in terms of perimenopausal symptoms or the impact of being in this phase of my life, because I didn't know when my period was going to start, because it'd been 9 weeks since my last one. It started the night before. It was really heavy. I was trying to run 40 miles a day.
Yeah.
I was carrying 10 kilos on my back because I was camping. There was a lot of things thrown into the mix that made that run in particular really difficult. And by the end of my first day, I was almost ready to throw in the towel.
And you were unsupported, weren't you? You didn't have anyone with you.
No,
so
I didn't have anyone with me. So thankfully, using phones, I was able to call home, spoke to Sharif, he calmed me down. I honestly was sitting on the side of a road, bawling my eyes out, or I thought I was on the side of a road. Turns out I was sitting at the base of a restaurant, but my head wasn't thinking straight. I'd run out of food, I'd run out of water. I was 40 miles in, I still wasn't at the campsite I was running to, and I wasn't thinking straight. My brain wasn't working properly, and he said, "Nick, you're sitting in front of a restaurant. Go in, ask for water, calm yourself down. You're not that far away," because he could look on Google location. He was able to tell me that I was just a couple of miles away from the campsite. It was enough to sort of calm me down, refocus, and get me to my finish line for that day, when I was able to go to sleep, clean myself up, and get ready to go the next day.
So one of the things that made that situation particularly difficult was the sort of the brain fog that you said. The fact that if that had happened to you before, do you think you would have found ways of resolving it more easily? But it was this is the thing that I've noticed the most, is this difficulty. It's not inability, it's just a difficulty to think more clearly. And that I used to be able to do that fairly easily, and it's only certain phases of my cycle, which is all over the place, that it pops up. But then you throw in trying to run long distances in heat, under duress, without water, so there are a few things that packed in, but this was I got to the end of that adventure really quite low, thinking I let my mental strategies sort of fall away. I started with the negative self-talk. I came back from that thinking that I was rubbish at this running stuff. I couldn't do this. There's no way I'm going to run across Australia. I had to come back and whilst I was deal with this menopausal cycle, or sorry, just your your normal menstrual cycle. Actually go back to more this mental strategy, because this is the thing that I can work on, and sort of go back to understanding why I want to do it, the deep-rooted reasons why, but also then the daily strategies and training sessions of better self-talk, and believing, and because you've got to certainly believe in yourself to be able to do these things. And if you start going down a slippery slope of no, I'm rubbish, then you're not going to get there. I think that's
yourself up.
That's one of the things that really struck me when I interviewed you in 2017, but also when I came out and ran with you a couple of times during that 63 marathon challenge, was that so I remember one day that it was, you were finding it really, really hard, and you were saying that, but at the same time, you always knew why you were doing it, and that was seemed to just keep you going. And I think that's how, I know you talk to children in schools, and that's a big part of why you want to do this as well, is to sort of inspire children and encourage them to be more active. And I think it's that, having that sort of very clear message about you know, sort of find your why. I remember you saying that, find your why, and making that happen for yourself.
So self-belief has to so whilst it's really good to have a team around you that will pick you up when you are having a really bad time, that belief has to be there. It has to be there, or else it will, you won't get very far. So even if the talk sometimes goes a bit astray, come back to that very core reason. I believe I can do this. It might hurt, it might look messy, but keep going, because the reason you're doing it is because you believed you could do it in the first place. If that thought's there, grab hold of it and stay with it the whole way through.
And so that was what helped you to get yourself back on your feet after that really difficult experience in the Netherlands.
So I had a really bad time, came home, started writing again. So that whole mental strategy is, I go out there and I train every day. I run and I practice and I practice and I practice. So came back home, started writing again. The reasons why, the self-belief, seeing it written down, verbalizing it in my head, so thinking it in my head and then verbalizing it on paper, and then going out talking again. And I then went out and did my next run, which is the length of Wales. Completely different. Had an absolute ball, but I really sort of worked on the mental strategies. It also helped that I didn't get a period during that adventure. So it has an impact, and I can see the difference. So it's something that I've got to try and I'm going to work on at the moment, or come up with a solution for the next adventure, which is hopefully try and find a way not to have a period during that adventure.